Welcome to the Entertainment Collective Podcast, your one-stop resource for insights to working in the entertainment industry. I'm Jonathan Pushkar.
And I'm Dallas Jack.
It's such a beautiful thing, too, the way that it worked out, because, you know, you see a lot of these guys. You could even take Neil, for example. You know, I'm sure that he played lots of, you know, small bars to crowds of nobody, and then all of a sudden you start writing these songs and you start having these hits and so on, and now he's one of the biggest touring musicians of all time, one of the most successful performers, songwriters, what have you. But it's different for him than you, because he, you know, worked for years and years and years to become Neil Diamond, and you worked for years and years and years to become, you know, a bass player that gets the calls, and you finally get the big call for it, and you get to go out and experience that alongside of him. Somebody like Neil Diamond doesn't know anything other than being Neil Diamond, but you now know every side of what it's like to be a bass player.
Maybe. You know, I never really thought of it that way, because I will say Neil really is just one of the greatest singer-songwriters. But it's not until I started learning the songs that I really grew to appreciate how deep he is. Yeah. Not only that, you know, we're on planes, buses, hotel rooms, stage, sound check, rehearsal, recording. You're giving people a lot of opportunity to show you exactly who they are, for better and worse. Neil Diamond, hands down, the greatest guy in the world. Wow. Every single day we were on tour, people would come up and say to me, "Tell me the truth. What's he really like?" And I would say, "I know you're waiting for me to say, ooh, he's not like that. Yeah. He's a different guy." He is the greatest, the most loyal. And on top of that, as I got into the songs, I was thinking, I know I heard this song 1,000 times like everybody else. This is some of the most brilliant lyrics I've ever heard in my life. And I didn't get a chance to experience that fully until I really played them. Yeah. The audience essentially was way ahead of me. See, they all experienced it. It hit them right in the heart 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and then last year when he released the record. Yeah. I was kind of behind the curve because I'm a snobby musician, and, you know, I'm just learning songs that I have to learn to get paid, and I have to learn these songs for tomorrow night, and I have to do this recording for this guy I've never heard of because he hired me. You go through all that, and we don't always have the appreciation as musicians. We don't always have the appreciation for the music that the common man does. Yeah. And it's almost too, you know, it's a negative. When I started playing Neil's music, I went, oh my God, this guy's a genius. You know, this is more than a gig. This is more than a paycheck. This is more than a tour. This is a whole different thing. This guy has opened my eyes. He's been called like the Messiah. He's got a message, and people want to hear his message, and they wait online to hear his message, and they fill arenas all over the world, to hear his message. And I was and will continue to be honored by my association with that whole operation. The whole Neil Diamond family is just an amazing situation.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So where do you go from here?
Nashville, I'm in the here and now. I'm sitting here doing this podcast, having the time of my life. I mean, I almost wish we had a camera, because I've been smiling. I've been talking nonstop. My energy's up. I haven't slept, as you know. Yeah. But I'm loving this right here. Yeah. You know, I'm hoping to start I guess I'll call it a career, and with essentially public speaking, doing some of which I'm doing right now with you guys.
What style of public speaking? There's a lot of venues that you can go to with that, like motivational, or more like telling your story, or what is it that you're looking for?
I'd like to think it would be a combination, and I'm kind of developing a program called the Groove Program, and I purposely use the word developing, not developed, because when you're talking about self-help, when you're talking about realization, when you're talking about self-actualization, we can all use those. Some of them are kind of, you know, pop psychology words. Some of them are kind of new age thinking. But when you get down to it, if you're looking to better yourself, are you ever done? I mean, I could not come here and say, hey, guess what, guys? Listen to me because I have all the answers for the next 45 minutes.
Yeah.
That would be absurd. I'm figuring it out like everybody else, but I have some perspectives that I think, maybe would help people unravel things a little bit, unravel some of the questions. If I may talk about this for a minute or two.
Yeah, of course.
I'm kind of a goofball at heart, and I think what happens is I take kind of a serious subject and I have a tendency to just infuse some humor into it. And then I take a humorous situation and say, hey, look, there's something serious to be learned from there. So I'm always kind of a little bit of maybe even the devil's advocate. But when it comes to like this self-realization and motivational stuff, I was trying to write it down. And I was having trouble writing it down because the scope of this is limitless.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, if I took a quote from the Bible and it said, nothing new under the sun. And I thought, well, I'm not really a biblical person. I don't know enough about it. So I thought maybe I'll make it more from my personal experience. My personal experience would be more like the menu at Taco Bell as opposed to the Bible. Now, those of you that have hung with me this long, I'm hoping you can, if the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun, well, that's a little too deep for me, but I'm going to say it this way. You go to like a Mexican restaurant, there'll be 138 things on the menu, but essentially it's all, what? Lettuce, tomato, guacamole. There's only 7 items.
Yeah, there's only 7.
But they call it 35 different things, and it's got little names that I can't pronounce, and tequilas and taquitos and so
it's so true. It's so accurate.
So what that led me to, through the biblical philosophical passage, and I'm one of the few guys that will make that leap to a fast food menu. What I was looking at was this. I don't think there is much new. What has to be new is your perspective. Looking at the same situation from a different perspective makes it new. You're not making new product. It's lettuce and tomato. But hey, well, what if I put more of this and a little less of this and I fry it? Well, it is something different. One of the great things I always thought would be a good example was, I'd always heard this story. I don't even know if it ever really happened, but a truck gets stuck under an overpass and they're calling out the police and fire trucks, and no one can figure out, what do we have to do? Do we have to, break the truck in half? Do we have to pull away the bridge? Do we have to start, getting stonemasons out here? And a little kid walks up and says, hey, I got a good idea. Why don't you take the air out of the tires? And everybody goes, wow. We had 30 adults, couldn't figure that out. We had technicians out here, they couldn't figure it out. And the 12-year-old walks over and says, no, I do that with my bicycle. You just take the air out of the tires and you... Well, the point of that story is, same situation. Everybody's looking at the top of the truck. This kid goes, hey, why don't we look at the bottom of the truck? You have an answer. He didn't invent a new truck. He didn't blow up the bridge. Same situation. If we look at it from a different angle. So that's kind of where I was coming from. There are plenty of people out there who do public speaking. There are plenty of self-help books, self-realization books, philosophy. It's not so much that you're going to say something new. You're hopefully going to say it in a way that strikes that chord with you. And so what I came up with the help of one Jonathan Pushkar, I'll give you a quick story on that, was he said, Bill, you have a lot of good content here. We just need kind of a tagline, something that you can frame it in. He said, you're a bass player. What if you use the acronym GROOVE? And I said, well, that's fine, but I'm a bass player, so I don't know what acronym means. But if we, You know, like sax players, they know what that
They
means.
know what
'cause
that
they went to
Keyboard
school.
players would know what
Yeah,
that
but
is.
I'm a bass player. I was like, I use words like, sandwich. Like, I know what that means. But I looked it up, and I found what acronym means, and I said, okay. So, essentially, I'll just kind of blow through this kind of fast, and this is the part where, like I said, I get serious and try to be humorous at the same time, because I do think there's room in your head and your heart for both if you're really approaching something, that you want to, with a certain amount of energy. You have to have, you can't take yourself too seriously, but you do have to be focused. So I'm thinking that there's room for both. So I took the idea of groove, and I said, well, here are the letters. G is gratitude. R is resonance. The two O's are oh yes and oh no. And that takes a little, kind of discussion, because it's not as simple as it sounds. The V is vibration, and the E is extra. The E is my favorite. And just to kind of go through it quickly, because my speaking engagement would probably be an hour talking about this part with some question and answer and some interaction from the audience. But the G being gratitude, I try to approach every gig, every rehearsal, every recording session with gratitude. As I was saying that to myself, I was realizing that you should probably take every day with gratitude. There's no reason not to. And if you aren't, maybe you should find the way to have gratitude and show gratitude. When you start with gratitude, you pretty much can't go wrong. The R in groove is for resonance. Now, when I say resonance, if something resonates with you for whatever reason, I think you should follow it. It's worth investigating. If the outside the box thinking where, you're going to school for math, you're going to school for accounting, but there's just something about you that bird watching just strikes a nerve, and you feel a little funny about it because, I don't know anybody that does bird watching, and I don't even know about it, but there's something about it that I'm drawn to. You should follow that. Doesn't mean you have to leave your job to do it, doesn't mean you have to throw away your life savings to do it. If something resonates with you, that's only positive. Things don't resonate in a negative fashion. It's not even neutral. If it resonates with you, follow it, big or small. The two O's, being oh yes and oh no, I kind of had fun with because, again, it's that humor and serious at the same time. The oh yes is, there are certain gigs that are just so obvious and certain opportunities that will present themselves to you. You have to do them. Yet, we all know people that don't because they're afraid of success, they're afraid of failure, they're afraid of something. And someone has to explain to them. I was fortunate enough to have people explain this to me. Someone has to explain to them, if you're afraid of failure, I'm going to make this easy. You are going to fail 1,000 times. We might have to redefine failure. That doesn't make you a failure. You failed that small little operation you were running. That will make you so much smarter and stronger for your next endeavor. You're going to fail. You're going to strike out. You're going to miss that foul shot. You're going to lose that interview. You're going to screw up. That's human nature. If that is paralyzing you, you need to change that immediately. Oh, yes, when it's obvious you need to go for it, you have to go for it. Your job here is to do something, not to do nothing. The oh no is similar to that in the sense that there are so many circumstances, not just in music, in life and in love, where you hear people say, I know I shouldn't have done that. I knew I shouldn't have done that last night. I probably shouldn't date that guy. I probably shouldn't drink that much. I probably shouldn't buy that car because it's too expensive. I really hate that gig. I don't really like that job anymore. Blah, 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 on and on. Well, you know what? When it's that obvious, you need to say, oh, no, emphatically, no. I don't mean something that's inconvenient, because that's a different thing. I don't mean something that, hey, you have a job to do. You got to wake up in the morning. Don't complain about traffic. No, that's life. That's not an oh, no. That's get up and do it. But the oh, no, when you're looking at your friend crashing and burning, saying, why are you throwing your life away with this when you should be doing something else? You just need to look at these incredibly obvious signs. And some people take comfort in the fact that they go, oh, no, I probably shouldn't. You know me. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. You can't be that person. Yeah. The V is vibration. And vibration is always an interesting topic for me because it's essentially molecules moving in air, atoms moving in air, right? Yeah. It's what makes a string vibrate on a fretboard. We are atoms and molecules, and we do vibrate. And from my perspective, when you line up the rest of the groove to find your personal groove, when you have the G, the R, the O, and the O together, you vibrate at a different frequency. You're a better human. You're happier, you're stronger, you're more confident. And when I say more confident and happier, that doesn't mean you're bulletproof, and it doesn't mean nothing's going to go wrong. It just means I'm seeing what's in front of me, short-term goals, mid-term goals, long-term goals. I'm vibrating at a frequency that I'm seeing all that. I'm going, yeah, man, you know what? I know I have 4 years of school ahead of me, but I'm going to knock it out of the park. You know what? I know that I'm not a math major, and I have to get through these math courses that are really hard, but I'm going to stay up all night, and I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to get it done. No one's handing you anything. No one's making it easy. You're realizing your potential. You're vibrating at a higher level than you were the day before. Yeah. So as I was writing this out, I got to that, and I said, well, who needs the E? Right? You got most of what you need there.
You're done.
And I'm incredibly pleased with myself. I'm rewriting language now. Hey everybody, hey Webster with the dictionary, we don't need the E on groove anymore.
It's silent anyway.
That's right. I'm going with the schwa sound myself because I don't need the E. I've traded it. I got to the E and I suddenly got very emotional. E does not stand for emotional, but I got very kind of introspective and things. And what I really did was this. I said, E has to stand for extra. This is what I mean by extra. I will once again go back to the greatest gig in the world, which is the Neil Diamond gig. If I went down the checklist, gratitude, resonance, oh yes, oh no, there's no downside to that gig, vibration, you're kidding me? I was elevated. I was walking on air when I got that gig. But here's the E. I got the gig. We're doing the Hollywood Bowl. We're doing arenas. We're doing the O2 in London. We sold it out 3 times. Actually, we sold it out 5 times. We go to the Forum in Los Angeles. There's the big poster outside saying, as of today, Neil Diamond has sold out more than anybody else, has played here more than anybody. Just ridiculous numbers. Wow. I refused to make that the end of the story. What I did was I made sure that every single gig, I went to the VIP lounge and said hello to those people. I went up to the handicap section, and I used the word handicap with reverence. I know that's not always politically correct, but I have a little brother who has Down syndrome, so I know I'm saying handicap so we all understand the challenge that I'm talking about. People up there in wheelchairs and things, I would go up there and sign autographs and talk to them and take pictures because I would say, hey, if you can make it through the snow and the rain in a wheelchair and crutches, oh, dude, I'm running up the stairs. Don't think 2 flights of stairs is going to stop me if you came all this way. So I knew that there was more, that there just had to be more than singing the right words, playing the right notes. There has to be more. If you can't find extra, you're not looking hard enough. So I did that. I also wrote, we had like an in-house kind of funny newsletter. I wrote for that every day. I had my little ritual. We would have the sound check, we'd have dinner, and then we'd have about an hour and a half before we went on stage. And I was sitting there. They used to call me Clark Kent. I'd be sitting there typing away at my little article before we all became Superman and jumped up on stage in front of 20,000 people.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that there was no way that I was stopping at V, if I can say that in this program. So the extra, to me, held the most weight because it was completely in my control. If there's not something there to be done, I'm going to invent something there. Another little ritual that I had was, I have a picture of it on my phone. I realize this is a podcast, but I would go to the worst seat in the house of every arena while it was empty, while we were doing sound check. I would sit in the very top seat. And I have a picture of me sitting at the Hollywood Bowl with the, whatever it says, you know, F12 or something is, the, you know, the very, very top.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and I would literally look at the stage and go, okay, tonight there's going to be 22,000 people here. The guy who's sitting in this chair, I'm going to assume, I'm going to fantasize here, he's a construction worker. He's been hammering nails, he's been mixing cement. This is his one night to take his wife out on a date and get a babysitter. He hasn't had a date with his wife in 2 months because they've been working so hard. He deserves the show of his life. I am responsible for him. Now, if ever I walk in here and think I'm not, it's time for me to go home. I took all that and put it all together, and as I painted this picture of myself, I was looking at it and saying, now, am I just saying this because I want to sell books? Am I just saying this because I want to do podcasts? Am I just saying this because I want to be famous? And I thought, no, I'm looking back. No, I'm walking the walk. You know, I'm not just talking the talk. I've done it. I've done it every gig for every time I've been on stage.
Yeah.
So as I went through this and I filled in the G and the R and the O and the O and the V and the E, and I went, okay, this makes sense to me. I think this is going to make sense to people. And that was the Groove program, which again started with the recommendation from Jonathan Pushkar, who said, you know, you could probably use an acronym in there and you could probably use Groove because you play bass, and that would be kind of an obvious hook. What I did at the end of that is, after looking at that for a couple of days, I thought, that might not work for quite everybody. We might need a little more sugar and spice on this. And I came up with a secondary one called Art. And the A is for adjustment, because you're going to have to make some adjustments in there. You're going to have to make, it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have to work it out. You need some wiggle room. There has to be a margin of error. Sometimes you just have to reinvent yourself. Sometimes it's more than an adjustment. You might have to reinvent your job. You might have to reprogram your own brain and rewire yourself and say, hey, I can't look at it that way anymore. I personally have become an author. I've become a playwright. I've become an executive producer on a television show. I'm now trying to break into public speaking. I have failed at all of those, and I have succeeded at all of those. I am getting started on this. At the end of that, there was the adjustment, which is A. There was the reinvention, which is R. And the very last thing is T, which is the truth. Your truth has to be evident. If your truth is you really want to be the family man with your wife and your kids, you should go for that and do whatever it takes to feed that dream. If you want to be a bass player, well, you know, Neil Diamond doesn't knock on your door. I played about 5,500 gigs in some pretty awful places all over the country before somebody called me for that. That is my truth. And at the end of all of this, when you go through all the groove and then you double check it with the ART, with the art, when you fill in all those blanks, you step back and you say, yeah, you know what? I've found my personal groove. I have to work at it. I have to maintain it. I have to keep it going. I'm going to fail from time to time, but I can look at myself in the mirror and say, I'm doing the right thing. I'm where I need to be. And I think I'm a complete person, and I'm a better person than I was yesterday, and I'll be a better person tomorrow. And I think when you can say all that, how much money you made, where you live, what you do for a living, kind of falls away, you know? When you can look at it and say, my life is complete, I'm where I want to be, doesn't mean I'm done. I think you found your personal groove and you can maintain that for the rest of your life. And that's my presentation.
Wow, that is so powerful.
If nothing else, I talked without taking a breath for about 22 minutes, if anybody's clocking that.
Which is a feat in and of itself.
Yeah. Good thing we have producers here who can edit this down to about 6 minutes.
I don't know if I want to cut any of that.
I don't know if we want to edit any of that. I think we want to make it 2 episodes.
I'm available. Hey, I have time on my hands. You know, it's interesting because I could feel myself getting emotional when I'm talking. I get excited about it. I get a little teary-eyed. When you find this stuff out about yourself and you apply it and you say, well, I'm talking about gigs when I was 19 years old. That's 41 years ago. I'm talking about gigs that were overseas, that were 7,000 miles away. How could that possibly relate to me sitting in a podcast in Nashville in 2018? And you realize everything's connected. Nothing's disconnected. You're drawing on your experiences. You're drawing on your love, and you're also drawing on your fears, and you have to balance that out. It's been said, everything you do is based in love and fear, one or the other. That is not an original thought of mine. I do agree with it. Pretty much every step you take is dictated by your experiences. Either you do something because you've never done it before, you don't do something, you're afraid of it because you've done it before and had bad results. Everything is based on your experiences. And I was just looking for a way of how could I communicate this to people where they might say, wow, I read that book and I didn't get that, or I've heard this before, but the way you said it, wow, it struck me. That's kind of what I'm looking to do. I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel. I'm just looking to maybe reach people, maybe primarily musicians, honestly, because I would relate better to musicians, and just say, hey, if you're asking me for a little bit of input, I could probably give you some. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Sure.
I could probably talk to you about the gig that you think is the greatest gig. I hate to burst your bubble. It might not be. But you know what? That gig that you hate, that you think is so stupid and meaningless, I got to tell you, I did what would be a stupid, meaningless gig a couple of thousand times in my life. And somewhere along the line, Don Was sitting in the audience and remembered it and made a phone call and said, hey, there's this cat, Cinque, guy with a ponytail. He seems like a nice guy. Yeah. I think he'd fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So if you look back, if we go all the way back to like the beginning of our conversation we had here.
Which is like 3 weeks ago, because I've been
like
talking
3 weeks ago
nonstop.
we started talking here. And
I've grown a beard since I started this podcast.
You mentioned that you grew up in a poor family and whatnot, where work ethic was really nailed in and whatnot. How has that, looking at your whole life story and everything, how has that affected who you are now, and that whole transition through Neil Diamond and all these incredible people that you've met and incredible experiences that you've had? What has been the overall story with that?
Well, I think humility is a word that should be used more often. When I think that I got to go around the world on a private plane and stay in the greatest hotels and have the greatest food, and that's before I did the gig, right? That's not, if the end of that story is, wow, we got to stay at all these places, but then I had to go shovel manure, well, this would be a different story. Right. Well, after that, my job, there aren't air quotes big enough for me to say, my job was to go out and play the greatest songs with the greatest singer-songwriter to the greatest audience in the greatest arenas of the world. I have trouble taking that and saying to somebody, some truck driver, and this guy's saying, wow, I've been driving across country And I'm saying, yeah, bro, I know what you mean. I work really hard too. See, I was staying at the Four Seasons, and then I played Madison Square Garden. It was a rough day for me because there was some traffic. No, he has a hard job. I don't have a hard job.
The bananas backstage weren't quite ripe yet. It was,
when you come from that sense of humility of look where I came from, and I didn't live. I wasn't living in a shack in the mountains or anything like that. But I mean, certainly humble beginnings would certainly cover it.
Yeah.
And I would look at what I have and I would say, man, I cannot help but be overwhelmed by this. I'm accomplishing everything I set out to do. Well, if you just go back 5 minutes, if you rolled back this tape and we talked about everything you do is from love and fear, and everything is based on your experience, whether you like it or not. Everything you're doing is based on the step you took before. Right? In philosophy, they had said, no man steps in the same river twice, because even if it's 10 seconds later, it's different water that's rushed past you, and you're a different person because you're 10 seconds older and you've already experienced the water, so there's no such thing as being static, right? Well, if you talk about those experiences, I'm not leaving those experiences behind. I came from over here and carried that with me, and now I'm sitting in a spot where I'm saying, man, I used to hope that 15 people would show up at a gig so I could pay the band, so I could pay for the hamburgers that we ate in the same club. Really,
yeah.
No exaggerating. I'm obviously going to work for free, but I just hope I don't have to pay for the dinner that they served us because I need 15 people to pay at the door. And here I am, at another point in my life, playing to 22,000 people, where you played to 22,000, you could have sold another 7,000 tickets like that.
Yeah.
As big as the place was, it just filled up. You carry all those things from your previous experience going all the way back to when you're 10 years old. And for me to be sitting there when I was 4 years old with my little wind-up ukulele, this is before your time, before digital,
yeah.
that little like music box thing with a crank on a little ukulele with strings on it that you didn't really play. I got one of those when I was 4 years old. There's pictures of me holding that. Here I am, 56 years later, I'm pretty much still playing the cranked up ukulele,
You haven't added any more strings.
Yeah,
Still four strings.
That's true.
Just lower strings.
Yeah, but the pay is better than when I was 4 years old.
Now I've got to see your bass if there's like a little wind-up crank on the back.
You know what? I'm going to have to install one. Wouldn't that be great? I'll just
How
put like a
awesome
rubber
would that be?
suction cup like the...
That would be cool.
Yeah.
And those who know.
It'll make a good
know.
story.
Yeah, so that'll determine who is listening to this podcast, because if I'm on stage with that and someone goes, hey, I dig that, I go, all right. You were listening to Jonathan in Dallas. Good.
That's
Exactly.
fun. Oh my gosh. Well, I just think about when you and I met. It was 2013 at the Iridium in New York City.
Right.
Peter Asher was playing there, and I was there with my mom. We were just there because I'm a huge old music geek and fan, and I would have been 16, 17, something like that. And, if anybody's listening and they're like, oh, this guy sounds like he's too nice, I don't believe it. Like, here's the proof, because I'm just sitting there in the audience before showtime, and you walked over to our table and were like, hey, how are you? And I'm like, great. Like, oh my gosh, this is the bass player for Peter Asher. This is so cool. And you didn't have to come over and say hi, but you did. And you introduced me to Jeff Ross, who's in the band as well, and the rest of the band, gave me your book and gave me your email, and we kept in touch. And here we are all these years later, having kept in touch.
Yeah.
And it would have been awesome to meet you after the show regardless, but you came to me and just said hi. And it's just, the value of networking first and foremost, but also, knowing, hey, here's this, teenager in the audience, like, I want to see from his vantage point what the show is going to be like, go talk to him. You didn't have to do that.
And depending, I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate the sentiment, and I guess depending on your perspective, from my perspective, yes, I did have to do that. If you people don't show up, I'm out of a job. And trust me, to the workforce out there, you don't want me doing anything else. You don't want me with a screwdriver. You don't want me. Just give me a bass and a microphone, and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm not meant for the real world at all. You know, it is. I do think it's part of my job, but I really don't do it out of obligation. I love talking, as you can tell. I love talking about everything. I love making fun of myself. And, you know, you guys, as I remember, you were there early. You know, you were probably like the first 10 people that walked in, and you were sitting, you know, you had a table. You weren't just hanging around. You weren't outside smoking a cigarette. I have to recognize the fact that when those people stop buying tickets, when those people stop waiting online, when those people stop buying your music, however they get it, I essentially am out of work. And I do believe I owe it to you to say thank you as an audience. I will never subscribe to that theory that I'm doing you a favor by being here on stage. No, 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 no. This is the ultimate example of a tree falling in the forest and no one there to hear it. You want to be the best band in the world and not have an audience, I don't know where that gets you. You know? I make it a point, as I did with you and as I will do with you, Dallas. I am easy to find. Email, Facebook, whatever. I've had people call me and say, hey, you know, 2 months ago I met you backstage and I was telling you about my son who's a guitar player, and I kind of feel weird because you said, please give me a call, but I didn't want to. I said, well, here I am. I have had conversations with 15-year-old guitar players. I've had conversations with 50-year-old dads who said, you know, I always wanted to play, but I was working, and now finally my kid's away at school. I want to start playing, be what they call a weekend warrior, you know, just play some bars, have some fun. I'm happy to talk to you about it. And I do. And I communicate by email or I meet with them and you know, talk with them on the phone if I can. And that's kind of what led me to the essentially trying to break into the public speaking forum, because I do have a lot to say. And I do come from vast experience. And I would never flatter myself in any other way other than to say, when it comes to making a living as a musician, I'm an expert. I am absolutely an expert because I've been doing it for more than 40 years. If you're asking me about being a technical musician, reading music, writing music, no. I'm not going to score anybody's movie. I do write music for movies and television, but that's my original compositions as like pop songs. There's a big difference between being a technician and being a working musician. I'm never going to teach at Belmont University unless they want to hear what I have to say, like right now. And I think that would be valuable. Yeah. But I'm not going to teach anybody how to read music because I don't know how to read music.
There's value to both sides, though. I always think of science teachers and science professors, not picking on anybody, and if any of my former teachers are listening, I'm not picking. But, you know, we can all think of that one science or math teacher that is so brilliant at knowing, you know, these equations and these solutions.
Jonathan, I was homeschooled, so shout out to my mom. But
yeah, so you're not about to tell your mom.
Good job, yeah.
But the idea being that, you know, some people are so brilliant at their craft that they can't teach it. They can barely talk about it. They get it up here cognitively, and it all makes sense, but to spew it out and to put it on paper and to write it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, there's the book smart, street smart idea. But, you know, I just find it fascinating. And I remember meeting you and hearing that you don't read music because I don't read music either. And so many people that I heard growing up, you know, not throwing anybody under the bus again, but a lot of people said, well, you know, you have to read. You have to be able to sight read and things like that. And there's value to it. Don't get me wrong. But you were the first living example that I'd met that was like, well, maybe not.
Yeah, you know, again, just so we can broaden the scope for the audience, you know, we could sit here and talk about musicians who reads music and who doesn't and who has a different technique. And, you know, Hank Aaron didn't have good technique as a batter.
Right.
I don't know that it hurt him too much. You
Yeah.
know, when you see those kind of situations where I think he batted cross-handed for part of the time. You know, he had his hands in the wrong. When you, there is the real world, and I have a saying that I use that I always say: keep one foot in the real world. Maybe not both feet, but keep one foot. I respectfully say to some of the scientists in the world, you know, from what I've been told, from a technical standpoint, a bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly. I think it's a bumblebee because the wings are too small, the body's too big, aerodynamics, I don't understand it. Shouldn't be able to fly. Well, look out the window, they're flying. So I don't know where you go with that. You know, I don't know how to further that conversation. It's just that you can't always explain things. Not everything fits in a neat little box. When it comes to life in general, that's true, particularly when it comes to the creative arts. It's extremely true. And I think it's your job as a creative being to just go for it. You know, I mean, again, that's an overused term, you know, you go for it. But when you really go for it, you feel the difference between, oh, I thought I was going for it, but now I see that I'm really going full throttle. I'm just opening up the floodgates. I'm going for that gig. I'm going for that job. I'm going for that school. That's a different thing. And you do sometimes essentially defy gravity if you allow yourself. You know, you kind of have to believe a little bit in the magic. Keeping one foot in the real world. But I've never let my imagination get the best of me. But I have an incredibly vivid imagination. And I think that's what you do is when you kind of harness your creativity, you kind of focus it. But sometimes it's out of your hands, right? I mean, you know, you have these, there are other forces at work. Some is external, some is internal. Who knows how it comes out? To ask Paul McCartney how he wrote certain songs, there's no real answer. He just did. Sometimes you write the music first, sometimes he wrote the words, sometimes he had a melody and no words, sometimes he had half of this, sometimes he made a mistake on the guitar and said, ooh, I like that better than what was written. Yeah. So everybody's looking for a formula and a recipe where I can say, if I do A, B, and C, I'll be like Paul McCartney. It's not going to happen. If I build something that looks and sounds and feels like a bumblebee, it's going to fly. It's probably not, because physics tells you it can't yet. There's the other side of things. Yeah. There are so many X factors in your life, which brings me back to why I kind of tried to develop the Groove program. It's like there's so much that you can control and there's so much that you can't control. The way to get a handle on it is to say, if it resonates with you, for me, if it resonates with you, that's a great place to say, wow, this resonates with me, plain and simple. Somebody says, why does it resonate? How does it resonate? How come this doesn't? I don't care. For me to try to talk you into liking chocolate ice cream if you'd rather have vanilla ice cream, why would I waste my time trying to talk you out of it? You like chocolate ice cream. I don't know why. You do. People spend too much energy on that other stuff. And that other stuff gets in the way. That other stuff builds up. It drags you down. It weighs on your heart. It weighs on your head. It stops you from seeing clearly. As a creative, thinking being, if something resonates with you, you should follow it. And it answers a lot of these other questions. If you go for it with gratitude and it resonates and you have the oh yes and the oh no, meaning you've made the choices that you need to make, and you feel yourself vibrating, you feel yourself, hey, wait a minute, I have a lot more clarity today than I did 2 years ago. Wow, you know, this gig that I thought wasn't gonna work, I put my nose to the grindstone, now it's a good gig. Wow, suddenly, you know, I had that debt that seemed out of control. All of a sudden I got it under control because I put a little focus. you get to the E and there's all the extras. And you realize, hey, I thought I was maxed out, but I'm not. I can do a whole lot more. And you find ways. Opportunity presents itself, you go for it. If it doesn't present itself, make an opportunity. You know? There's a wall. Well, I can jump over it. I can run around it. I might just have to kick a hole through it. I might have to make a window, a door, you know, but I'm not going to stop. I'm not, that wall, they have yet to build the wall that I have said, ooh, I can't jump that high. I'm going to turn around. No, I'll take a running start.
Yeah.
I'll get you to help me. I'll get a trampoline. I'll get a step ladder. But I'm going to find a way, you know. And I really think that that feeds into all of this because it really, you can enjoy the ride. Yeah. Getting over that fear, getting over those obstacles, meeting those challenges, it can be fun. It's not all, you know, toil. A lot of it is just, you can enjoy the ride. And that is why it starts with the G, with the capital G, with the grandest G of all. And that's gratitude. When you start with gratitude and all those other things fall into place and you just go, man, you know what? This is working for me. It can be a wonderful life. And for me, it's a tremendous life. It's more than wonderful. I have to say, I flew from Los Angeles to Nashville to talk to you guys. I didn't do that because it was an obligation. I didn't do that with my tail between my legs. I was ready to go. Los Angeles time, I was up at 5 this morning. I haven't slept yet. I could talk another 3 hours. Your battery will run out before my voice will run out.
Yeah, we can plug in.
Yeah. Well, so can I.
We've got wall power.
Man, so if anyone wants to reach out to you to hear more about what you do or get the book, where would be a great place for them to go?
My website is billcinque.com, and it's a tough name. It's Bill, BILLCINQUE.com. Cinque, it's actually Italian for cinque. It means 5 in Italian. Cinque means 5. But it's billcinque.com. And anybody that wants to communicate with me can find me there. You can buy my book there. You can hear my music there. You could read my resume. You could see some of my, I've done a couple of television shows and I've interviews and speaking engagements, and there's some videos. There's even some, one of my club bands that I did a video. So there's a lot of information, and I would welcome anybody calling, whether it was a younger musician who just said, you know what, I don't even know what questions to ask, which I get a lot of that. You know, kind of like it's too big to wrap my arms around. I don't even know where to start. And I do, as I mentioned before, I speak to parents who say, wow, I want to encourage my kid, but I've seen so many things go wrong with musicians, and I understand that too. I will say this, I know we should probably start wrapping things up here, but in all my life of playing music 5, 6, and 7 nights a week in clubs and bars and everything else, I've never had a drink. I've never had a beer. I've never had a glass of wine. I've never had a cigarette. I've never smoked pot. I've never done an illegal drug. I really haven't done any drugs. I don't even do aspirin, which is true. I don't drink coffee. Wow. It's not a religious thing. It's just the way it has worked out. But you can be clean living and still play music. You don't have to read music to still play music. You don't have to sell your soul to play music. You don't have to give up your day job to play music. There's a lot of different ways to go about a life in music, which I do have in my book, as we, you know, just to post it again, you know, The Amazing Adventures of a Marginally Successful Musician. That was why I wrote it, and I would welcome anybody who hears this to get in touch with me any which way you'd like, and I'd be happy to talk with you.
truly incredible. Thank you so much for doing this interview and talking.
Thank you. This was a
This
ball.
has been phenomenal.
Let's do this again.
Yeah.
All
Let's
right.
start
Do
from the
it.
beginning.
Let's do it. All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bill. It has been a pleasure to have you on. I'm sure that this will not be the last time that we talk with you here. And man, this has just been so great. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
so
you for
much.
having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Entertainment Collective podcast. Be sure to subscribe, write a review, and follow us on social media. We hope that what you learned today will bring you one step closer to meeting your goals in the entertainment industry.